So I've been giving my Dharma talks on a Zen teaching poem that comes from the early 8th century, the 8th generation of the Zen lineage, or Zen lineage, which started in the 6th century, 5th century really, 5th century after Christ, not BC, ACE, CE. So it's a real foundational text. It's called The Identity of Relative and Absolute. And I've been using this as a launching point for my Dharma talks. So I think I have a shorter talk today. I think that's because the 4 lines that I'm talking of are pretty direct and straightforward. And also, I wanted to give some time for more discussion and more questions that you may have in our discussion period. So maybe I'll prompt something of that at the end of my talk. Right. So in these Dharma talks, I'm manifesting my Dharma, as we all are, with my whatever clarity that I can bring to the situation. And I'm using words to talk about the Dharma, which is what we use to talk about anything. But my words are pointers to the deepest Dharma of the Zen understanding. So you don't take them as fixed notions that you have to swallow, if you will. Okay, it's more like a pointer. So take it in that way. So that's what these lines address this specifically. Reading words, you should grasp the great reality. Do not judge by any standards. If you don't see the way, you don't see it even as you walk on it. Reading words, you should grasp the great reality. Do not judge by any standards. If you do not see the way, you do not see it even as you walk on it. Okay. So this poem is really deep Dharma. It's pointing directly in a number of different ways from a number of different angles at the primary truth of reality and of our natures, of our Buddha natures. And it doesn't say that much about practice. This poem, it's really deep Dharma. It doesn't say too much about practice. So I'll attempt to bring out some aspects of practice, and then perhaps you'll have your own questions or reflections on how do we practice this deep Dharma. So this deep Dharma in these lines is the foundational understanding in Zen, that reality cannot be captured by concepts, cannot be captured by words. Words and concepts will always just be pointers. We say fingers pointing at the moon. The moon is the reality of our natures. And the words and the concepts are just the pointer. And yet, what we so often do is we get fixated on the hand, we get fixated on the finger and the point, and we miss the actual matter that the fingers are pointing to. So we're deeply wired to organize our experience in this way, to really have it be about this. And Zen practice is about really opening up our awareness and really experiencing our true nature. So right from the beginning in our Zen lineage, our lore is that Zen was founded by a figure called Bodhidharma from the late 5th century Christian era. So about 1,000 years after Shakyamuni Buddha, the historical Buddha. And one of the things that Bodhidharma is reputed to have said is that Zen Buddhism, form of Buddhism, is a special transmission outside the scriptures, beyond words and letters, directly pointing to our true nature. Beyond words and letters. Right from the beginning, this is foundational for Zen. Now, for 1,000 years, there had been, as there still are, study of scriptures, study of the Buddha's words, study of his teachings, teachings and commentaries from other teachers, all through that. And all of those were great, valid, wonderful pointers to the truth. And yet there's still a tendency to focus on the concepts and not on the reality. So Zen became this radical movement of focusing on the reality, always. Okay, not getting sidestepped. Go directly to the truth. So those of us who are really pursuing an experience of the deepest level of our reality, everybody in this room falls into that category, right? We're perhaps prone to attach to words and concepts. We're curious, we're seekers, we want to understand the world, we want to understand ourselves, we want to organize our experience. And words and concepts help us to do this. And we feel that these profound, deep concepts and ideas, impermanence, no self, emptiness, absolute, whatever it may be, Buddha, that's it. And those concepts do point to it, something profound and deep. But we get hung up on the words. And even when this poem was written, which was 200 years after Bodhidharma founded Zen, Sekito Kisen is the master who wrote this poem, and he had to put these lines right at the beginning of this poem, and those of you who have been here for the series know this, in the way there is no northern or southern school. Right at the beginning he says this. In the way there is no northern or southern school. So 200 years after Bodhidharma, and suddenly there's schools and there's sects that have evolved with their different articulation of what the Zen Dharma was and different practices. And you think, oh, well, surely they didn't argue with each other. Yes, they argued with each other. The northern school thought they were a better school, and the southern school thought they were a better school. So always we fall into division, fall into polarization, fall into this is the right expression, this is the right way of understanding this, and this is the right way of practicing it. So I would encourage you to not feel like you're immune to this tendency to take sides, but to really prioritize your own opinions and views of things. Because that's all they are. They're opinions and views based on words and concepts. Now, I've come to appreciate more and more how words are really at the core of so many of our arguments and our disagreements. We invest so much in those words. One example is, this whole kind of propaganda that, certain right-wing political, movements, and now here I'm going and I'm labeling them right-wing, so I'm doing something of this myself. Right? What does that even mean? That creates a whole world in itself, a whole understanding. So I'll go ahead and put those in quotes or brackets and just say, certain movement of ideology, calls another whole group of people socialists. And they use that as a magnet for judgment, criticism, and attack. Right? Anybody who has this opinion, or something like this opinion, of how we should organize society, is a socialist, and that's bad and deserves our scorn and outrage. Right? But we're all really open-minded people. We don't do that, do we? Here's something I've discovered with my wife. I've been married for a year. We've been together for 6.5 years. And as I frequently share in the group, we fight a lot. We argue a lot. We're both opinionated. And we're both very sensitive. So we get hurt. And then we do what people do when we get hurt. And here's something I've discovered. It's so much based on the words we're using with each other. She says something, and then I see she has an opinion about me, or she's organizing her experience in a certain way, and I've got a problem with that. And I try to articulate, I'd like to think kindly, my way. Why don't you see it this way? Thereby invalidating her way of seeing it. And so quickly it escalates. It escalates to really charged, emotionally charged argumentation. And we've gotten some insight into how, wow, this is so much about the words that we're using with each other. Why do I have to say that? So we've started growling at each other. Yeah, like when we can get it, like when we have this, purchase, this insight, this moment of presence, and we just don't say a word, just like, "Arr!" And then she'll come back, "Arr!" And if we can do that, maintain that for, a few minutes, and really drop the words and not go back to the but, wow, it's awesome. We move right through it. It's like, because that's what it's about. That's really what it's about at the core. I'm mad at you. We act out a whole kind of, two big cats kind of interacting with each other. Yeah, be careful. Be careful with your words. They're loaded guns, for yourself and for others. We're so attached to them because they do organize our experience for us. They orient us. They give sense. They give meaning, right? We use the words to give sense and meaning. And we're meaning-making creatures. We're sense-seeking creatures. We're pattern-seeking creatures. And the words and concepts are in service of all of that creativity, of sense-making, meaning-making. And that's important. We need to do that. But we need to recognize where that's coming from, and that it's all temporary. It's all provisional. Nothing is fixed. It's fundamentally why the words themselves do not conform to reality, because reality is always changing. One of the 3 seals of Buddhism is impermanence. Everything is always changing. Fixity is an illusion. Fixity of any sort is an illusion. It's not reality. And yet concepts and words partake of fixity. Fixity of meaning, fixity of concept. Doesn't do it. Doesn't reach it. The hand is not the moon. So obviously words are really important, though. This sense-making, this meaning-making, and even as seekers, right? How do we learn about Buddhism? How do we learn about the Dharma? Right? It's the words of the old masters. It's the words of the lineage of the teachers. We didn't have recordings of audio, video recordings of teachers until less than 100 years ago, right? So we've got 1,400 years of words that have just come forward to us, just as their words, men and women through the ages, enlightened beings. So this is valuable. These words are very valuable words, right? So we don't want to discard them. In fact, we might even think that their words are all we have. But is that true? In our Zen tradition, when a master dies, we don't say that he or she has died. We say that they're hidden. Walt Whitman in Song of Myself said, "When I pass from this body, look for me under your boot soles." So is it true that all we have of Buddha, Bodhidharma, and all the masters is the words that have come down? Look under your boot soles. Look at the moon. Listen to the river. We do a lot of refinement of translations. We always have to fine-tune, even revise the words that we use to understand the Dharma. So again, I want our appreciation to be really properly located here. We're not just throwing away words at all. It's very important to work with them at the subtlest nuance level so that the meaning that we are transmitting with them is as accurate in its pointing. And we're not saying, there's the moon. No, we want to be really clear with our pointing, right? So here's an interesting example that has come to me. The early language of the precepts in Zen, maybe Buddhism too, talks a lot about good and evil. We have a language of good and evil. Well, in the last few decades of Buddhism in America, for maybe obvious reasons, there's a problem. People have a problem with that good and evil, and what does that mean, and good, and what does that mean? So there's kind of a desire to have a deeper understanding of that. So in my lineage, we talk about the precepts as being things that lead us towards a more wholesome life versus a less wholesome life. Wholesome, unwholesome, or more wholesome and less wholesome. Like that. And I don't know about you, but I loved that. I love that way of looking at the precepts. It was so helpful to me to make that shift. And I continue to see the precepts in that way, wholesomeness versus goodness, unwholesomeness versus evil, right? And at the same time, wholesome, unwholesome words. Can we ever fix something and say, that's wholesome? And always will be. That's unwholesome and always will be. What's wholesome? The same thing might be wholesome in one moment and then not wholesome in the next moment. So always, 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 we have to carry with us this understanding. It's always moving, it's always fluid, and the concepts are always part of this great unfolding reality. Always. So the same thing with terms like wounded and healed. Right? A lot of power in those words, a lot of meaning in those words, a lot of ability to help us relieve suffering with an understanding of that kind of paradigm. And at the same time, if you hold to that, I'm wounded, or that person is wounded, keep that fixed. And then I need to heal, or they need to heal to get from this place to that place. There's a subtle violence that can be done. So we can't be attached or insistent about our categories, our ideas, our rules. So this has been a lot about the Dharma element, and now the question of, so how do we practice? How do we practice letting go? And I'll invite you to inquire and perhaps bring forth some questions about how do we practice with this. Our practice, I'll say a few things. is about taking reality moment to moment in. It's like a fish feeding underwater. It just opens its mouth and then moves through whatever, I don't know, algae field or whatever, their food source is, and the food just comes in. That's how we take our practice. We move forward, we take reality and experience into our senses, into our lives, into our experience, and we metabolize it. Like so. This is how we practice Zen altogether. It's not easy to live our lives this way. You say, okay, I'm gonna go out and I've got a job to do, and I've got a plan for tomorrow, and I've got to figure out how to make an income to pay my bills, and I've got a family to raise, and I've got relationships to take care of. It's not easy to live out of that place of presence and acceptance, which makes it so wonderful and really necessary to be in a community that is doing that intentionally, living forth from the moment of our lives, allowing life to present itself to you. And meeting it to the best of your ability, metabolizing it as your particular body mind metabolizes it. You'll take something from an experience that I won't take. It's because that's your path, that's your life, that's your dharma. But to be together in a community where everybody has that intentionality with how they allow life to enter into them, permeate them, transform them, it's really wonderful. It's really great. I'm very grateful to all of you in this room and in this Sangha. I should look here when I'm looking there, in this Sangha. To live this life together, day by day. It's essential and it's beautiful to have the support and the kinship of those who are living and practicing in this way. So the last line of this section is, if you do not see the way, you do not see it even as you walk on it. Well, guess what? You're walking on it because it's reality. So look down at the ground of your experience. You don't have to look up to the destination or what you think is the destination. Be fully present to your sensory experience every moment. We could say, so this is, if you do not see the way, you do not see it even as you walk on it. If you do not see the way as you walk on it, you do not see the way. So, how do you walk? How do you walk? How are you walking right now? How are you walking forward in your life? That's the practice. That's the question. How are you walking forward in this life? No, that's what we practice. Okay. So I'll invite you in your zazen to we'll have some nice time to share and discuss. So I invite you to reflect on a question you may have about how to practice this way. Okay, I'd like to open it up to some discussion on that, and anything you have to share, of course, about how you practice this way. Yeah, we'll talk about that. Thank you.